Hey everyone, and welcome back. If you're a UPSC aspirant, burning the midnight oil for those current events, you're in the right place. Today's deep dive is going to be especially helpful for your prep. Whether you're focused on mains or even brushing up for prelims, we're tackling a pressing issue that's making headlines. It has serious implications for ecology, agriculture, and socioeconomics. The human-elephant conflict in Chhattisgarh. We'll be drawing insights from a recent study published in Down to Earth. So let's get right into it.
Yeah, this study is a goldmine for understanding a conflict that's unfortunately becoming more and more common. It delves into the concept of an ecological trap, which is when an environment seems appealing to a species at first, but actually poses long-term threats.
Interesting. So how does this ecological trap idea play out in Chhattisgarh, specifically with elephants?
Well, think about it. As natural habitats shrink due to human activities, elephants are forced to move into areas they wouldn't normally inhabit. In Chhattisgarh, this means they're increasingly venturing into landscapes dominated by humans and agriculture. The researchers call this passive dispersal. The elephants aren't actively choosing these new areas, they're being pushed into them by circumstances.
So it's not like they're setting out on an adventure to find new territory. They're being displaced. And this displacement leads to conflict, right? We hear about human deaths and crop damage all the time.
Absolutely. India sees a tragic number of human deaths annually due to elephant encounters, and millions of hectares of crops are lost. This study highlights how Chhattisgarh is sadly a microcosm of this larger national issue.
The study mentions that the conflict is most intense in areas with fragmented forests and high human activity, which makes sense given what we've been talking about. But what about the specifics? Where exactly in Chhattisgarh is this conflict playing out, and what kind of crops are the elephants targeting?
The researchers conducted a detailed analysis of crop loss across 10 forest divisions. That's a massive area to study. Their findings showed widespread crop loss, particularly in areas with intensive elephant activity. And it's not just a particular type of elephant causing the damage either. Both solitary bulls and female herds were observed foraging on crops. Sugarcane, rice, maize, and wheat were the hardest hit. High-calorie, easily accessible crops that are, unfortunately, quite tempting for a hungry elephant.
It almost sounds like setting up a buffet right in their path.
Yeah.
So given that habitat loss is driving the elephants into these areas, you'd think improving habitats within those forest fragments would help, right? Maybe by providing more water sources or increasing the density of vegetation.
That's where it gets tricky. And where the study's findings get really thought-provoking. They found that even seemingly helpful measures, like augmenting water sources in smaller forest patches, can actually backfire. While these improvements might attract elephants temporarily, they might not provide enough resources to sustain them in the long run. This could actually exacerbate the problem by drawing elephants into closer proximity to crops, increasing the chances of raiding.
So it's not just about creating pockets of attractiveness within human-dominated landscapes. We need to think more holistically about ensuring those areas are truly viable for elephants in the long term.
Exactly. And that's where the study's deep dive into a 1,200 square kilometer hotspot comes in. They wanted to understand not just the patterns of crop loss, but also the underlying factors driving the conflict at a very granular level.
Okay, let's dig into those findings. What did the researchers discover about the dynamics of this conflict within that hotspot?
One striking finding was the widespread presence of both solitary bulls and female herds foraging on crops. This tells us that the conflict isn't just driven by a few rogue individuals. It's a systemic issue impacting the entire elephant population in the area. They also found that crop losses were consistently higher in areas with high elephant activity, further reinforcing the link between habitat loss and human-elephant conflict.
That makes sense. If elephants are being squeezed into smaller and smaller spaces, they're bound to come into contact with human settlements and agricultural areas more frequently.
Precisely. Now, one common suggestion for mitigating this conflict is to encourage farmers to switch to crops that elephants find less palatable, but the study challenges this simplistic approach.
I can see why that might be a bit of a band-aid solution. There are so many factors to consider, not just the elephant's preferences.
Right. For one, the political economy of agriculture plays a huge role. Farmers make decisions based on market demand profitability and what they can realistically grow given their resources and the local climate.
And of course, you can't forget about food security. Many communities rely heavily on these crops for their own sustenance and livelihoods. Forcing them to switch to less profitable or less familiar crops could have serious consequences.
Absolutely. And let's not underestimate the adaptability of elephants. Even if farmers switch to less palatable crops, there's no guarantee that elephants won't eventually develop a taste for them, especially if their natural food sources remain scarce.
So simply trying to shift the conflict to new areas by changing crop patterns isn't a sustainable solution. It seems like we need to address the root cause habitat loss, while also finding ways to manage the conflict in the meantime.
You've hit the nail on the head, and that's where the study's recommendations come in. They emphasize the need to increase the amount of time elephants spend in large connected forest patches.
Why is that so crucial?
Because these large, undisturbed areas are more likely to have the diverse resources that elephants need to thrive. When elephants can roam freely and access their natural food sources, their dependence on crops decreases, and so does the likelihood of conflict.
So it's about creating spaces where elephants can truly be elephants, rather than forcing them to adapt to human-modified landscapes.
Exactly. The study specifically recommends institutionalizing elephant monitoring programs, which means having a systematic way to track their movements and understand their behavior patterns.
That sounds like valuable data. If we can better predict where and when conflict is likely to occur, we can be more proactive in preventing it.
Precisely. Early warning systems, community awareness campaigns, and even simple physical barriers like electric fences can be deployed strategically to reduce encounters between elephants and humans.
This is where it gets really interesting for our UPSC aspirants. This issue isn't just about ecology and conservation. It has deep connections to governance policy and sustainable development.
Right. Think about it. To tackle this problem effectively, you need coordinated efforts across multiple departments and stakeholders. You need the Forest Department to manage and protect elephant habitats. You need the Agriculture Department to support farmers and explore alternative livelihood options. You need local communities to be involved in decision-making and conflict mitigation strategies.
And you absolutely need a robust system for compensating farmers for crop losses, which brings in the role of governance and effective policy implementation.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the amount of compensation, it's also about the process. It needs to be timely, transparent, and accessible to those who need it the most. If the process is too bureaucratic or slow, it can breed resentment and undermine conservation efforts.
This is starting to feel like a classic UPSC case study, where you have a complex problem with ecological, economic, and social dimensions, and you need a multi-pronged approach to address it.
It really is. This issue perfectly highlights the interconnectedness of everything we study for the UPSC, from environmental science to public administration to rural development.
So let's turn this into a mini UPSC brainstorming session. Imagine you're advising the Chhattisgarh government on how to tackle this human-elephant conflict. What key policy recommendations would you prioritize?
That's a great challenge. Well, I think I would start by emphasizing the importance of landscape-level conservation. We need to move away from focusing on isolated, fragmented patches of forest and think bigger. We need to create large, interconnected corridors that allow elephants to move freely and access the resources they need. This will require careful land use planning and collaboration with neighboring states, as well as ensuring that development projects don't further fragment elephant habitats.
That's a solid foundation. But we can't forget about the people who are living alongside these elephants.
Of course. Sustainable development has to be at the core of any solution. We need to explore alternative livelihood options for communities affected by the conflict, perhaps ecotourism or sustainable agriculture practices that can coexist with elephants.
And education and awareness campaigns are crucial. We need to bridge the gap between humans and elephants, fostering understanding and respect for these magnificent creatures. It's not about choosing sides. It's about finding ways for both species to thrive.
Well said. It's about finding that delicate balance between human needs and ecological imperatives. It's a challenge, but it's not insurmountable. With the right policies, innovative solutions, and a collaborative spirit, we can create a future where humans and elephants can coexist peacefully.
This has been a fascinating deep dive, and I'm sure our listeners are buzzing with ideas. This issue really has so many layers, and it's a perfect example of how environmental challenges are often intertwined with social and economic factors.
Absolutely, and that's why it's such a relevant topic for the UPSC. It tests your ability to think critically, connect different concepts, and propose practical solutions that consider all sides of the issue.
So for all our aspiring civil servants out there, this deep dive is a great opportunity to put your analytical skills to the test. Think about the different perspectives we've discussed, the study's findings, and the policy recommendations we've explored.
Imagine you're sitting in that UPSC interview, and you're asked about the human-elephant conflict. You can now draw on this deep dive to articulate the complexities of the issue, the ecological and socioeconomic factors at play, and the potential pathways to a more sustainable future for both humans and elephants.
And don't forget, this deep dive is just the starting point. We encourage you to do your own research, read the full article in Down to Earth, and explore different perspectives on this multifaceted issue.
That's the beauty of learning. It's a continuous journey. And for UPSC aspirants, that journey is all about diving deep into complex issues, developing your own insights, and honing your ability to analyze and articulate solutions.
And if you have any burning questions about this topic, or anything else related to the UPSC exam, drop them in the comments section below. We're here to support you on your journey to becoming future leaders and policymakers.
We'd love to hear your thoughts, insights, and even your own policy recommendations. After all, the best way to learn is to engage in thoughtful discussion and share ideas with others.
So hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into current affairs, and most importantly, keep those minds sharp and those aspirations burning bright.
And remember, every challenge is an opportunity for growth and learning. So keep diving deep, keep exploring, and best of luck with your UPSC journey.
That's a wrap for today's deep dive on the human-elephant conflict in Chhattisgarh. We hope you found it insightful and engaging. Until next time, happy studying.